The jet hadn't flown in 7 years. It sat in the farthest bay of Hangar 9, coated in wind-blown dust and engine silence, like a monument no one visited anymore. But tonight, beneath the sodium haze, someone was cleaning it. Not with rags or solvents, but with memory. Her gloves moved slow. Fingertips traced the rivets, pausing at the scar lines on the intake vents, like checking if they still ached. She didn't speak. Machines don't need words. They need someone who remembers how they breathe. A young pilot passed by, helmet under one arm, scoffing. "That thing still works?" The woman didn't look up. She tied her hair back, and for a second, under the collar of her flight suit, a faded tattoo flickered into view. A hawk diving through storm clouds. He didn't notice, but the jet did. If you've ever been underestimated, this story is yours. Drop your city in the comments and subscribe if you've ever come back stronger. Her name, at least according to the clipboard tucked behind the door of Hangar 9, was Marla Vance. No rank, no call sign, no backstory, just civilian aircraft maintenance technician, level 3 clearance. That label fit easily on a line, easier than the weight she carried. At Dry Lake Air Base, names meant less than noise. The base wasn't for glory. It was a graveyard with a landing strip. A desert-baked facility halfway between nowhere and the memory of somewhere. Home to decommissioned airframes and pilots one mistake away from transfer. Even the wind felt old. Marla had been here 2 years. She lived in the converted supply bunkers near the southern fence line. Ate alone, walked alone, worked graveyard shifts. Most assumed she was ex-military, dishonorably discharged, or maybe married to someone who died in uniform. No one asked. She never offered. She didn't wear her hair military tight, but it was always pulled back. She kept her boots clean, her jumpsuit zipped, her tone neutral. She never raised her voice, never raised her hand. Just appeared, did the job, disappeared again. Like a habit no one wanted to admit they depended on. And somehow, she knew every inch of Sky Fury D7, the oldest, dustiest, most unloved jet on the field. Its wings were faded, its tail fin held together with composite patches and stubbornness. No pilot had flown it in years. No tech had even filed a report on it in months. But Marla? She touched it like it still had a heartbeat. The younger pilots joked about her. Ghost wrench. Hangar lady. That woman who stares at the cockpit like it owes her money. No one bothered to learn her real story. Not Lieutenant Aidan Callan, who strutted through Dry Lake simulator hallways with his jumpsuit half-zipped and his ego fully engaged. Not the flight captains, who glanced at her during briefings like she'd wandered in by accident. Only the machines seemed to understand she belonged. Because when Marla walked past the rows of grounded jets, the wind stilled. When she placed her palm on a fuselage, the skin of the aircraft warmed. And when she stood in silence, eyes fixed on a horizon only she could see, even the sky seemed to pause. Long before Dry Lake, before the grease and silence, before the name Marla Vance ever appeared on a personnel roster, she flew. Her real name was Captain M. Elaine Vero, and she didn't fly transport or recon. She flew edge missions. No satellite support. No extraction guarantee. Just a call sign, hollow echo, and coordinates few dared to enter. She was Stormfield Squadron's lead pilot, a unit born of necessity and erased by consequence. And it ended in a place called Jakar, a country that flickered in and out of war maps like a faulty transmission. The operation was named Furnace Drop, classified, sanctioned, and doomed before it even launched. 5 jets, inbound at 0 dark 30. Intel said low resistance. Reality said otherwise. The ambush was fast, silent, and brutal. One by one, her squad mates vanished from comms. ECM interference scrambled their beacons. Radar flared and died. Elaine had no orders, no map, just a sick feeling in her chest and a distress ping from a ground team pinned in a canyon. She broke formation, dived below blackout altitude. No permission. She found the team, extracted them under fire, brought 5 soldiers home, and brought the black box with her. The tribunal never asked how many lives she saved. They asked why she disobeyed, why she rerouted, why she ignored protocol, why she came back when no one told her to. She didn't defend herself. She didn't speak at all. 3 weeks later, her clearance was suspended, her wings revoked, her file stamped with a red mark. Tactical deviation, irregular judgment under stress. They offered her a choice, resignation or reassignment. She chose neither. She vanished. The next time she touched a cockpit was 5 years later, on a contractor form. Her name had changed, her record sealed, but her hands still remembered. Every switch, every hum, every tremble in the yoke when an aircraft was scared. At Dry Lake, she asked for the hangar farthest from the tarmac. They gave her hangar 9. Inside, she found D7, a Sky Fury relic with a cracked heat exchanger and a scorched nose cone. It hadn't flown since the last test pilot declared it unfit for atmospheric climbs. They were going to gut it for salvage. But when Elaine, now Marla, touched it, the console lit up for the first time in years. She didn't say anything. She just started fixing it. There were nights she thought about furnace drop. She would wake with sweat in her collar, heart pacing like engines spinning dry, memories looping, smoke, screams, the silence that followed. Sometimes she walked to the locker in the back of the hangar. It was black, unmarked. The kind you didn't open unless you were ready to bleed again. Inside were only 2 things: a folded flight jacket with the Stormfield insignia still stitched under the collar, and a data drive labeled in her own handwriting, Jakar, Final Loop. She hadn't played it. Not once. But she hadn't thrown it away either. That was how she knew. She hadn't stopped flying. She'd just been waiting. The call came just before sunrise. A recon team, 4 men and a tech officer, had gone dark near Mad River Ridge, a stretch of razor-edged canyons 80 miles north of Dry Lake. Last known coordinates placed them inside a comms shadow. No SAT-link return, no emergency ping. One of them had triggered a silent fallback protocol, but nothing more followed. Dry Lake's command center flickered to life. Lights. Radios. Officers in partial uniform clutching coffee and urgency. The colonel stormed through the control room in desert boots and yesterday's fatigue, barking orders that clashed against a wall of hesitation. The flight roster was grim. Most of the jets were grounded, awaiting replacement parts or mid-cycle diagnostics. The only operational option was Sky Fury D7, a relic. Command dismissed it outright. "That jet hasn't seen sky in a decade," someone scoffed. "We'd lose it before we find them." But someone else had a different answer. Marla had been in the hangar since 3 a.m., rerouting the auxiliary power couplings manually. She hadn't slept. Her gloves were dusted in carbon and frustration. She heard the base alert buzz and didn't look up. She already knew D7 was going to be asked for something, and she wanted to be the one to answer. At 0611, she walked into the command center. "I have a jet that can fly," she said. The room turned. Silence followed. Then laughter. Short, sharp, defense mechanism laughter. "You have a what?" the comms officer asked. "Sky Fury D7. I've rebuilt every core system over the last 6 months. Flight ready, air stable, radar range short but functional." "You're not on the pilot roster," someone else cut in. "I'm not asking for paperwork," she replied. "I'm offering a solution." From the back of the room, a familiar voice stirred. Lieutenant Callan. He stepped forward, arms crossed. "You're not cleared for this," he said flatly. Marla looked up, voice calm. "Clearance doesn't know how she flies. I do." Callan scoffed. "Since when does a wrench read wind vectors?" She didn't blink. "Since wind started sounding like voices." Callan's smirk was thin. "And you think you can fly into Mad River solo in that museum piece and bring out 5 missing men?" "I know I can," she said. Callan turned to the colonel. "Sir, with permission, I'd like to prep Jet 6. I've flown that region in sim. I can track low altitude and adjust for signal gaps." The colonel hesitated. "Jet 6 isn't greenlit. I can get it there in 20. Before anyone could answer, Marla turned and walked out. She wasn't going to argue, not when the plane was already waiting. She entered Hangar 9 like it was a chapel. The sun hadn't broken the horizon yet, but the metal glistened faintly under the amber lights. The moment she stepped inside, the jet's cabin lights flickered on, once, then steady. Not approval, not fate. Recognition. She climbed into the cockpit. Her body fit like memory. She didn't look at the checklist. Her fingers moved without asking. Fuel cell? Full? Heat exchangers? Stable? Weapon panel? Yellow? Functional enough. The cockpit was warm. She didn't feel the cold anymore. From outside, voices echoed. "What the hell is she doing?" It was Callan again, walking in with 2 other pilots, half-dressed and half-panicked. "She's lighting the core," someone yelled. Marla toggled the avionics. The engine gave a low thrum, the kind that vibrated the ribs before reaching the ears. Callan climbed the ladder, stopped at the canopy. "You'll blow the intake if you spool without diagnostics." Marla looked at him, calm. "I ran them 3 nights ago." He stared. "No one authorized this." "She doesn't need it," another voice cut in, Chief Elliott leaning against a fuel cart. "She flew Stormfield." Callan's face shifted. "What?" Elliott didn't blink. "She was Hollow Echo, back when you were still learning flaps in a simulator." The silence cracked through the hangar like a dropped wrench. Inside the cockpit, Marla adjusted the trim. Outside, the colonel appeared at last. His face was carved from tired concrete. He scanned the scene. The lit jet, the silent crew, the open secret blooming at his feet. "Who can fly?" he asked. No one answered. Then Marla spoke. "I can. I know that ridge. I know this jet. I don't need a briefing. I need clearance." The colonel paused, looked to Elliott, then to Callan. "You?" he asked. "You willing to fly back up?" Callan hesitated. For the first time, there was no smugness in his voice. "Yes, sir. I'll follow her lead." The colonel nodded once. "Then suit up. Wheels up in 15. The prep was wordless. Callan slid into his jumpsuit, hands shaking slightly at the wrist. His mind ran every terrain sim he'd ever completed. None of them looked like Mad River. He'd flown over valleys, ridgelines, canyons, but never a place like this. Not in real life. Not with blood on the line. Marla moved like the mission had already started. No wasted motion. Every strap secured with intention. Every panel checked without pause. She adjusted her oxygen feed and opened the cockpit screen. The air outside was thin and bitter. The kind of air that knew how to kill engines. The kind of air that whispered, "This is not a drill." By the time the flight line cleared, the sky was a bruised steel. 2 jets sat ready, one gleaming with new polymer paint and digital stabilizers, the other older, heavier, still bearing sun-faded warnings on its wings. One was called Sky Fury X. The other was D7, Marla called it home. The takeoff was uneventful. No ceremony, no applause. Just two machines breaking from the ground like they'd done it yesterday. Once airborne, Marla took point. Callan stayed 10 seconds behind and 100 feet above, his HUD flickering with minor anomalies. Wind shear was already rising. That early in the morning, it shouldn't have been this violent. Echo 1, be advised. Crosswinds hitting plus 22 knots rising, Callan reported. Copy, she said. No strain in her voice, just awareness. Her voice over the comms was unnerving, measured, steady, almost too calm, like someone narrating a memory. Below them, the ground fractured into spines of rock and bone. The Mad River Ridge wasn't a river. It was a scar. A series of jagged canyons formed from tectonic collision and erosion. Shadows formed faster than signals. They passed waypoint Charlie 12, nothing. Charlie 13, static. Then, Echo 1, I've got flare residue, Callan radioed. Left quadrant, 15 degrees west. Marla rolled into a banked turn. Her jet curved wide, slow, steady. She didn't jolt, didn't climb. She skimmed the ridgeline so low that dust rose in waves behind her. Looks like someone popped smoke, she said. But it's dissipated. Possible movement ahead, Callan added. She didn't answer. She was already diving. The approach vector narrowed. Below was a canyon barely wide enough for wingspan, ringed with boulders and blind from satellite. Command had never mapped this zone. It was too unstable. But Marla didn't need maps. She remembered. The way the rocks folded here. The way the wind tunneled. The shift in color when the ground dipped. She could feel the heat change in her fingertips. The slight tremble in the yoke that told her the ground was closer than the altimeter thought. That's when she saw it. A shimmer of glass. Just a corner, reflecting sunlight from under a rock shelf. Then a shape. A figure hunched low, motionless. Another kneeling, waving something. They weren't dead. Not yet. She keyed the comm. Visual on recon team. No active engagement. Proceeding with low hover. Copy, Callan replied. But his voice had changed. Something in it had dropped. The edge had softened. Respect doesn't need volume, only timing. She dropped D7 into a near hover. Its turbines howled but held. The narrow LZ left no room for error. Her bird's skids touched the shale for 3 seconds, just long enough for her co-pilot to kick the hatch and jump out with a rescue harness. From above, Callan circled, scanning. There's movement on the ridge, he warned. Northeast shelf. Eyes on, Marla replied. Sure enough, 2 silhouettes, wrong uniforms. One held a rifle, the other adjusted something metallic. She ran a mental trajectory. If it was a launcher, the exhaust vector would... Too late. A flash. A streak. Incoming. Callan shouted, Missile inbound! Marla didn't blink. She yanked the bird laterally, rotated 30 degrees, dumped altitude. The missile screamed past her left engine and exploded midair. The shockwave hit them both, but D7 held. Barely. Callan's voice came through ragged. Jesus, Echo 1, report. I'm flying, she said. Package, she barked into the side comm. Her co-pilot shouted back, We've got 2 on board, 1 bleeding out. Wrap and load, 30 seconds. Another streak, this time from the other ridge. 2 launchers, Callan warned. I've got one, he added, diving into an attack arc. Marla toggled fire control. D7's cannon system was half manual, but still good for 1 burst. She aimed by feel. Her thumb met the trigger. 3 rounds, all hit. The second launcher vanished in flame. The hatch slammed. The crewman screamed, Go! Marla pulled up. Skids cleared rock by inches. Dust exploded behind her. Echo 1 to base. We have 2 evacuees. 1 critical, 1 mobile. En route return. Callan formed up behind her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The only sound left was the old jet purring like it was born again. And in a way, it was. The return flight should have been quiet, but the desert wasn't finished with them yet. 5 minutes into the climb, the warning lights flared again. Low oil pressure on the right engine. The aftermath of the shock wave, probably. D7's hydraulics weren't designed for abrupt lateral slams. Not anymore. Marla adjusted trim, stabilized yaw, and dropped speed to compensate. The old bird groaned, like a veteran forced out of retirement too soon. Her co-pilot in the back relayed vitals. Sergeant is stable but fading. Pressure dropping. ETA to medpad. 8 minutes, Marla said flatly. Assuming nothing else tries to kill us. Above and behind, Callan watched from a trailing position. He hadn't said much since the extraction, but the way he mirrored her flight path, precise, restrained, was different. He wasn't just flying with her now. He was learning. At 9,000 feet, turbulence increased. The wind clawed at the frame. D7 trembled but didn't falter. Callan's voice came through. "You ever do this before?" he asked. The tone was careful, almost quiet. Marla took a breath. "Not like this." A beat of silence. "I read about furnace drop once," he said. She didn't respond. "They said only 1 bird came back." Still nothing. Callan waited. Then, "They said the pilot broke orders, saved lives, got buried for it." Marla's hand tightened on the stick. She spoke evenly. "The story's not important." "I think it is," he said. A flicker passed her eyes. Not quite pain, not quite pride. "I didn't fly to save them," she murmured. "I flew because no one else did." Callan didn't press. He just stayed on her 6, silent now, honoring the space between words. Dry Lake shimmered on the horizon. Flat, pale, unremarkable, but it had never looked more like home. Marla lowered altitude. The engine still whined, but the instruments held. Behind her, the sergeant moaned. The co-pilot swore softly under breath, trying to keep him conscious. 2 minutes, she said. "Prep for rough set-down." "Tower, this is Echo 1 coming in with injured evac. Clear pad 3. A pause, then base control responded. "Copy that, Echo 1. Pad 3 is yours. Emergency teams en route." The runway opened like a ribbon of forgiveness. As she descended, the chatter picked up. Other birds, other channels. Someone in command was asking questions. Who the hell is Echo 1? Wasn't that jet retired? Who authorized this? She ignored it all. The only voice that mattered was the one in her headset saying, "Stay with me, soldier. Almost there." Touchdown was imperfect. Left skid kissed too hard, bounced once. D7 settled, growling. Not pretty, but alive. Marla popped the canopy, climbed down without theatrics. A wave of heat hit her. Sunrise now in full bloom. Medics rushed past. One of them nearly clipped her shoulder. The co-pilot shouted vitals. Callan landed moments later, slower, smoother, younger, but not the lead. He jogged over, eyes wide, words forming, dying in his throat. "You..." He stopped, shook his head. She just handed him the data drive from her pocket. Black. Unlabeled. He stared. "What is this?" "Furnace drop," she said. Then walked past him like the story was finally over. But it wasn't. Not yet. The data drive burned in Callan's hand. Not in temperature, but in weight. It felt like holding someone's silence. A history no one had dared to speak, suddenly handed to him like a question with no answer. Behind him, medics loaded the injured. Base crew gathered near the pad, half still in motion, half frozen mid-step. Word had spread faster than protocol. They had seen her fly, and no one could unsee it. From the control tower, Colonel Strass watched everything through binoculars. He said nothing for almost a full minute. Then he put the optics down, handed them to his aide, and walked. Down the stairs, across the field, straight toward the woman who, by all accounts, wasn't supposed to exist. Marla stood by the wing of D7, one hand on the hot skin of the fuselage, like saying goodbye to something that had carried her farther than any uniform ever had. "Captain Varro," the colonel said. She didn't turn, didn't correct him either. "That call sign, hollow echo. I haven't heard it in 9 years." "Neither have I," she said quietly. The wind picked up, just enough to lift the edge of her collar. The old tattoo was visible now, not hidden, not ashamed. Strass paused, then spoke lower. "You saved them." She finally looked at him. "I didn't do it for them. I did it because the bird remembered how to fly, and because I remembered how to listen." The colonel nodded. "No tribunal this time. No red stamps. Just tell me what you want." Marla hesitated. Then, "Keep her in the air." "Done. And next time someone calls in from a dead zone, you send the one who's been there." He smiled, tired. "And if that's you? It won't always be. But if it is, you'll know where to find me." She turned, walked back into Hangar 9, the same way she came, alone but never abandoned. Inside, the light was dim again, the air cooler. The walls held their breath. And in the far corner, beside the black locker, sat a flight helmet no one else dared touch. She picked it up, not like reclaiming something, but like welcoming it home. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Some legends don't end in noise. They end in silence. And then, begin again. Weeks passed. The sun kept rising over Dry Lake, unforgiving as ever. Jets came and went, some too new to fear anything, others too old to care. But something had changed, subtle like a fault line adjusting after pressure releases. In the hangars, they stopped calling her Ghost Wrench. Now they just called her Echo. It started quietly. A whisper between tech crews, a nod from a pilot before takeoff, a gloved hand tapping the fuselage of D7 with reverence, like it had flown through time and come back with someone worth following. She didn't accept a reinstatement, didn't pose for photos. When command offered her a new flight badge, she left it in its envelope unopened, resting on the corner of her workbench beside an old wrench and a mug that simply said, "I listen to engines." But she flew. Not always. Not for drills or shows. But when the call came from the far side of the map, when signal loss carried silence instead of static, she flew. They never made her lead squadrons again. She didn't want command. She only asked for clearance, and a bird that trusted her hands. Lieutenant Callan changed too. He stopped talking so much, started watching more. When new recruits arrived, full of swagger and simulation stats, he pointed them toward Hangar 9. "Watch her," he'd say. "And if you ever hear her give advice, don't interrupt." One afternoon, a cadet named Vickers saw her running diagnostics with her ear pressed against the engine. He laughed. "She listening for ghosts?" Callan didn't laugh. "Yeah," he said, "and if you're lucky, one might answer." Some nights, she stayed long after shift ended. The base quieted, lights dimmed, and she would walk the flight line in boots that still remembered how to land after turbulence. Past jets that didn't know her name, past faces that now nodded first. Sometimes she'd stand under the nose of D7, eyes closed, fingers resting against the skin like checking a pulse. She never brought up Jakar. But one evening, Chief Elliot found her sitting beside the black locker. The drive was plugged into a rusted laptop. The final log of furnace drop played on screen. Muffled voices, radar screams, one broken cry that cut short just before the evac. She didn't cry. She just sat there, eyes dry, hand resting on the helmet in her lap. "This shouldn't exist," she said. Elliot crouched beside her. "Neither should you." They buried the old call sign officially 3 months later. Hollow Echo was struck from the classified roster, marked as deceased in action. But the name lived on in another way. Echo 1 became the unofficial term on base for anyone who flew when no one else would. A mechanic, a pilot, a memory, a story. One morning, a new lieutenant cornered Callan near the mess. "Hey, sir, that older tech, the one with the hawk tattoo, she real?" Callan looked at him, then out toward the hangars. She was out there, beside the jet, wiping the canopy glass, alone, focused, still. "She's more real than anyone I've ever flown with," he said. The lieutenant blinked. "Think she'd train me?" Callan smiled. "No. Why not?" "Because she doesn't train pilots. She trains people who remember why they wanted to fly in the first place." That night, Marla stood beneath the stars. No engine noise, no mission, no emergency. Just her and the sky. Silent, indifferent, endless. She didn't salute, just touched the fuselage once. Light, firm. And the old jet answered, engine ticking softly in the cooling air. The past hadn't called her back. It had never let her go. If this story reminded you that some voices speak loudest in silence, don't let them be forgotten. Comment below. Was there ever a moment you had to prove who you were, without saying a word? And if you believe legends aren't made, they're remembered. Subscribe to This Really Happened. We tell stories that fly beyond the page.